what's cool about this article that I'm going to read is this is framed now from NHL players. So we talk about these concepts a lot, and we've talked about it with different things. But now I'm going to be taking it explicitly from the NHL, from these guys that are self-reporting about their childhood. And
Self-reporting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like we've directly asked the NHL players what it was like for their upbringing, and they're reporting what it is. So I got a couple different headings here, but I'm gonna read some of it. I'm kind of flipping back and forth between two things, but I'll read it, and then I just want to get kind of your input on what they're talking about here. Okay. So here's the start of the article. This was from USA Hockey. Michael Doyle was the author of this one article, and then there was another thing I'm going to touch on afterwards. So this is starting the article off. With the nonstop, heart-pounding action of the Stanley Cup playoffs, it's easy to be excited about hockey in the spring and early summer months. But when it comes to our own young hockey players, it's important to be cautious about too much ice time during the off-season. All athletes, including NHL players, need time away from the rink for a number of reasons, but children especially so. While they're taking a break from the ice, the best way to promote their hockey skills is by playing other sports and activities. Participating in a variety of sports enhances kids' overall athletic ability, which will make them better hockey players. Athletic development at any age is important, said Christian Koling. Don't know if I'm saying that right. USA Hockey's coach-in-chief for the Minnesota district. Specifically, if you look at the long-term athletic development phases. So we're going to touch on that in a second here. So I'm gonna flip over now to an NHL survey that they did among players. This was from Greg Revak. I'm not sure how to say that, but he put out a tweet relating to this article that I'm touching on. So these are just kind of some of the main hitters on that. Anything to say before I jump onto the stats here?
Nope.
Good.
I didn't know that the long-term development was in that article, but I already touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. So here's some of the kind of key hitters of it, and then we'll talk about it a bit, and then I'm gonna go back to that article after. Okay. So this is from NHL players. Okay, this is what this report came from. So from ages 5 to 14, 98% of NHL players participated in a sport other than hockey.
So what was it, 5 to 14?
From ages 5 to 14. So 98% of them participated in another sport. So none of them are single sport from ages 5 to 14. More than half of them played soccer and or street roller hockey, which that's kind of a gray area for me. Baseball, 48%, golf, 43%, basketball, 28%, outdoor sports, 24%, tennis, 23%, football, 22%. That was the top 8 of the distribution of sports among that 98%. Here's kind of where it gets more interesting now. From ages 15 to 18, nearly 80% of the NHL players continued to participate in a sport other than hockey while also chasing their on-ice dream. Golf was 42%, which is the most heavily played sport that they stayed consistent with from early childhood, followed by street or roller hockey, again, gray area, 24%. Baseball, 20%. That's their top 3. Nearly 20% played soccer during the 15 to 18 age range, though this was the steepest drop-off from early childhood. So even from 15 to 18, when we talk about that as hockey crunch time, they said nearly 80% of NHL players still continue to play another sport. That would be organized sport, right? Not just they're playing recreational, okay? The average NHL player began skating and playing hockey after 4 years old and did not specialize, meaning they continued to participate regularly in other sports until after the age of 14. Though the age of specialization most often provided by players was 16. So around 16 is when they start to mainly focus on the one, but they still have elements of those other sports, even all the way up to 16, right? On average, the people most critical to the player's hockey development is their father, 86%, their mother, 68%, brother, 31%, coach, 23%, and grandparent, 13%. So that's just another kind of interesting stat on the way. So those are just some basic stats about what actual NHL players, current NHL players, and what they're following along. And this is pretty standard among what like normal kids are doing. They normally have a sport or two, they'll have a sport or two that they play in addition to hockey. So normally when I talk to kids about it, they're playing baseball, soccer. One of those two are popular in our area in the summertime or in the off season. And a lot of them are pursuing that other sport seriously also. You know, they're doing both. It's not until that kind of age we talk about where it's 16-ish, 15, 16, where kids start to focus more heavily on the one sport. And I think even the only reason for that, like just flashing back to when I was a kid, I think it was 14, 15 for me when I started to go down just the hockey track. And I think it was more just like the logistics of it than anything. It's like just trying to get around to, because at the same time that hockey is ramping up in terms of commitment, all the other sports are also ramping up. So you can't really do both. So it was more like I was forced to choose one at that point, as opposed to I just didn't want to do that thing anymore. If I could have logistically kept up playing baseball, because I also play AAA baseball, I would have continued to do that, but it was just too much. Like you just don't have enough time.
Yeah, mom and dad are never home.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So any, I guess, any kind of thoughts on that to start with, from in terms of the percentages, 98% from ages 5 to 14 playing another sport.
Well, I'll go with that one to start. I think that makes total sense. That makes total sense. Like if you talk to a lot of players, I don't want to say especially, but it seems from when I hear interviews or read things from U.S. and maybe even European. I'm not sure about that, but I know U.S. That makes sense with the model of how their sports is, right? Because a lot of things are high school centered, right? You might have AAA, but they have a lot of school sports. It's a lot different than it. Not saying Canadian schools don't have sports, but playing for your school and being the school athlete it seems to be a little bit more cool. I don't know if that's the word, to do that in the States. Like you're just brought up that way. You play for this school and you grow up that way. And I think that makes total sense that kids don't specialize in hockey yet. And then being 5 to 14, well, that just makes sense because like how, to our point earlier, how would you know if you're a hockey player or a baseball player? Like a child, I believe, like, and I can just look at my kids, when they grew up, hockey was the best. And then lacrosse came, and then lacrosse was the best. And it was like they loved them both. And if you said pick one, yeah, like I know my youngest one would have said, well, if I have to pick one, I'll take hockey. But if I can play them all, I want to play them all. And it wasn't, if I could be a pro lacrosse player or just play lacrosse, like whatever you want to call it, that would have been, for sure he would have played until he couldn't anymore. But there came a point in this area where it was like, okay, like, and actually the biggest thing that we had to talk as a family was to it's like, we just can't travel every weekend. Like we just can't do it. That's what it was. We sat down and broke his heart, and it wasn't like you have to play hockey. It's, yeah, you have to pick one if we're going to go away during that season. So it was hockey for him. And so we said, let's pick up another sport. So we chose a couple other ones where it was not wasn't so time intensive and cost intensive, where we could stay at home on the weekends. It saved our lives, like just to be a family. But like, I could see that at 14, like he was a good player, but he didn't know. Like that was just, you're still talking about, I want to play in the NHL. Like that's just a bunch of words. Like no one knows. And or I want to be a pro NLL guy, or I want to be a wrestler or a boxer or whatever. So you're playing sports, and that's the thing. I think that a lot of that comes down to like, in how couldn't it? And maybe I sound ridiculous here, but how could it not come from the parents? Pushing one more than the other.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So I think that up to 14, I think that of course you're playing sports, you're playing it for fun, and everyone has, most kids, I shouldn't say everyone, a lot of people that play, especially if they're decent, are thinking that, oh, I can go on and play at the highest level. Like I want to play in the OHL, I want to play in college. Well, that's not a ridiculous thing to say when you're 14, right? That's, you're a good player in your area, but you haven't really seen the big picture yet.
Yeah.